Hello friends, and welcome back to Sweet Magnolias. In today's video, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the topic of comparison. I think it's something that we all deal with at some point, and especially now with the invention of social media, comparison just really has a habit of getting out of control. There's a quote that I really like that says, "Comparison is the thief of joy." I've seen a lot of discourse around who actually said it, but no matter who said it, I think the sentiment of that quote is very, very true. Comparison will steal all of your joy and happiness. Comparison is kind of like the seed of a poison oak plant. Poison oak is distributed primarily through birds that eat the berries off of the plants, and then once they, run their natural course, they end up in soil, which grows all over again. My yard in the summertime is absolutely overtaken by poison oak. The perimeter around our yard just gets completely overgrown with poison oak, which of course causes me a lot of anxiety as a mom of little kids. I hate poison oak. I do my best to try to keep us out of it because it is so invasive. It just takes over and of course has a terrible, terrible itchy rash. Comparison is kind of like the seed of the poison oak. If you allow it to take root in your life, it will grow into an absolute monster. And out of comparison comes a lot of other things like discontentment, jealousy, envy, malice. And all of this, of course, leads to complete loss of joy and peace. I would say most of us probably struggle with comparison in our life at some point. I know that I have had times in my life where I have really struggled with comparison. And I think we're even more likely to compare these days. Like I said, with the invention of social media and with that becoming such a prevalent thing today, it's a lot easier to begin to compare your life to other people. With social media, most people tend to put the highlights of their life, all the pretty parts of their life, because of course they do. That's the primary reason of why people enjoy social media. They want to see beautiful things. They want to see where people are traveling to. We look to social media for inspiration. And speaking for myself, I want to see pretty pictures and beautiful travel videos, put together fashion looks and beautiful home design. That's the reason that I go to social media. And I appreciate that some people keep it real, but I already know that everyone has dirty dishes. I want to see the pretty stuff. Like, that's primarily why I go to social media. I very much appreciate when people do kind of show, hey, I have bad days too. Hey, I have dirty dishes too. Like, I really do appreciate that. And I, of course, value authenticity and just the genuineness that some people have on social media. But I would say that primarily I go to social media for the beautiful things. And I feel like social media is kind of a two-edged sword. While we love finding community and inspiration, on bad days, social media can become a tool for comparison and discontentment, but only if you let it. The Bible also warns against comparison. 2 Corinthians 10:12, in the latter part of the verse, it says, "But they, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves, are not wise." The Bible also warns against envy and discontentment, and both of those things stem from comparison. 1 Timothy 6:6 says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain." With contentment comes peace and joy, whereas the opposite is true if we are constantly comparing what we have with what others have. I want to go back to talking about social media for a minute, but everything that I'm going to say I think would apply in real life or in social media. And also I want to say that everything that I say in this video, it's convicting to me. I'm talking to myself just as much as I'm talking to you, because I myself have dealt with a lot of comparison and struggling to compare myself to others. So just know it's not me preaching to you. I'm talking to myself as well. But there are two things that I tend to notice with social media. And the first one is that when people post something that they have, or they post about something that they have succeeded in, there's always a lot of negativity in their comment section, and people accusing them of, oh, you must have a wealthy family, or oh, you must be in debt, or oh, this, oh, that. And I think that those kinds of comments are left by people who have a comparison problem, and they allow themselves to get bitter and resentful because they're comparing what they have to what people on social media have. And I get that there is a total validity to saying, well, the grass is not always greener on the other side, because that's definitely true. You may look at somebody that has some stuff and it may be true. They may be in debt. But I think that by comparing yourself, a lot of times you can allow that bitterness to grow in your heart. And out of that comes the result of a lot of people accusing people of, things like, oh, you must be in debt, or, oh, you must have a wealthy family, blah, 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 and completely discounting the fact that that person could have just put in an insane amount of work to get to where they are, put in an insane amount of work to acquire what they have. I saw a video that I think is a great example of this. It was somebody that was showing the process of them building their dream home on their dream property. And the comments were just full of negativity towards this couple. And then she did a video posting about how much time it took to build this, how much sacrificing, how much saving, how they did a lot of the work themselves, and how they did not have outside help. They did not do it through a lot of debt. And just showing, hey, there was actually a ton of work that went into this. It wasn't, it didn't just happen. It's not something that we just jumped into and did a lot of debt to. We put in a lot of work for this. And I think a lot of times too, when we compare ourselves and compare what we have to what somebody else has, and then we project that insecurity onto them, it's kind of a way to make us feel better because we don't want to put in that work. We're not going to put in that work to acquire that. But that bitterness, that resentfulness that has grown because of the fact that we're comparing ourselves, instead of just being happy for that person and applauding that person, we, in our sin nature, because we're so flawed, in our sin nature, we want to criticize. The second thing that I notice with social media is that when people post just these beautiful reels where they show themselves baking something extravagant, or maybe their kids are helping them, or maybe they are decorating their house and they're just showing the most beautiful parts of their house and it doesn't look messy at all, whatever it may be, when they're just posting the good and the positive, they get a lot of comments that are like, this is not relatable. This is not realistic. And people are mad because they're not showing their piles of laundry and their dirty dishes. And the thing that I find so funny is if that person were to turn it around and show their dirty dishes and show their dirty laundry and show their house when it's a mess, they would get criticism on that side as well. You cannot win. That's kind of a different subject, but you just kind of cannot win with people sometimes. But I think the one thing that we need to remember, that we all need to remember, is not everything is meant to be relatable to you. And I really kind of think that, especially with social media, we've kind of made an idol out of relatability and being realistic to the point where it's gotten quite out of hand. And I think you have to also remember that those creators are not obligated to show you their messiness and their bad days. Everybody has bad days. We all know that everybody has bad days. And they're not obligated to show that. And I think that a lot of times when we go onto social media, particularly if we're having a bad day, I know for me, this has been the case for me. A couple years ago, I was going through a hard time. I was going through some postpartum stuff. I was struggling. I was so not on top of it as a homemaker. And as a mother, I was just really, really struggling. And I found myself, whenever I would get onto social media and I would see these fellow women that were just rocking it at home, they were making homemade food, they were deep cleaning their house, they were doing whatever, doing all the homemaking things. Because I was in that season where I was struggling, I found myself getting bitter and resentful towards these women that I don't really even know on a personal level, because they were doing better than I was. And of course, I did not comment that. Never comment negativity on somebody else's page. That's awful. That's rude. And you will regret that. But it's a problem in my heart. It was a problem in my heart. I was comparing myself to other people because I was in a hard season, and I started growing bitter and resentful and getting that just bad attitude. And that put me in a really bad heart posture, and it really did not help me be productive in my own home. And I think that a lot of times when especially if we're having bad days or we're in times where we're just struggling, social media is not really the place to go, because you're going to end up looking at other people and what other people have going on, and it's going to make it worse. Sometimes it's better to just really just hone in, focus on yourself, focus on your home, focus on your family, and get yourself in order. And like I said, if you don't, you can sometimes get in this place where you just have a very bad attitude and you start feeling that way towards people that you don't even know. And I think that can just be so detrimental to your home, to your spirit, to your family. It's going to rob you of all of your joy, like we've already talked about. And it's like tree rot. It just spreads. It's terrible. So I just think that we need to learn to look at things for inspiration, for motivation, not to compare ourselves to it. And we also need to learn to do self-reflection. Recognize when you're starting to compare yourself to someone and when you're starting to grow that resentment. Look at it, say, okay, this is on me. I'm having a bad attitude and I need to fix it. And, if I'm a Christian, so part of that is going to be me praying and asking the Lord to help me and to help me not struggle with that so much and help me not to grow resentful towards other people and just to do better in my home. Some of that is also going to be trying to actually put in more work to discipline myself, more self-discipline, that kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with that. I think you can't just use it's not realistic as an excuse all the time. Some things are not realistic in certain seasons of life. And I totally get that. I'm in a sort of season like that right now where some things are just not realistic. But just because it's not realistic for you doesn't mean that it's not realistic for somebody else. Where I have strengths, somebody else might not be strong in that area. And where I have weaknesses, somebody else may be strong in that area. We're all different. And you have to really just focus on you and your home and your family and your life and look at, how can I make this better? How can I improve? How can I become more disciplined? How can I save more? Look at how you can do the work instead of comparing yourself to what somebody else has and saying, well, that's just not realistic. Whenever you find yourself starting to compare your life, that is always a very good time to count your blessings, because we have been so very blessed. Look at all the blessings in your life and all the things that you've been given, and try to replace that comparison heart with a grateful heart. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you have gotten some encouragement from it. I hope that it has blessed your heart in some way. If it has, please be sure to like the video. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you guys in my next one.